The snowstorm raged across the mountain valley when retired U.S. officer Jack Mercer stumbled upon something that would change his life forever. Lying half buried in the snow was a dying German shepherd, its body trembling, eyes pleading for help. And pressed against its side were two tiny puppies, barely breathing. Jack had seen death before on battlefields and in broken homes, but never like this. He wrapped them in his coat, whispering, "Hang on, soldier. I've got you now." What he didn't know was that saving this dog and her pups would uncover a past buried deep in military secrets, a bond between man and animal that went beyond loyalty. Before the night was over, Jack would face a truth that would leave him shocked. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled through the pine trees like a cry from the past, sharp and endless. Snow fell in heavy, silent waves across the mountain valley, covering everything in white except the dim glow of a single cabin window. Inside, Jack Mercer sat by the fire, the wood crackling faintly, his eyes lost in the flames. A retired U.S. officer, he had traded the noise of war for the silence of the wilderness, but the ghosts of the battlefield had followed him home. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind outside still made him reach instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. Then came the sound. A faint, broken whimper. At first, Jack thought it was the wind, but it came again. A cry, raw and trembling, slicing through the storm. He rose, heart pounding, grabbed his flashlight, and opened the cabin door. The cold hit him like a slap, snow biting into his face as he stepped out into the storm. The beam of light swept over the endless white until it caught movement near the tree line. There, half buried in the snow, lay a German shepherd, motionless except for a weak twitch of its paw. Its eyes blinked slowly, glazed with exhaustion, and pressed against her body were two small puppies whimpering softly, trying to burrow into her fur for warmth. Jack's breath caught. He knelt beside them, the beam of his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Hey, easy now," he whispered, his voice gentle but urgent. He felt for a pulse. The dog's heart was faint but still fighting. The puppies, barely a few weeks old, shivered violently, their little breaths shallow and uneven. Without a second thought, Jack removed his coat and wrapped all three inside it. The weight of the shepherd was heavier than he expected, but he lifted her in his arms, holding the puppies close against his chest. The cold bit deeper as he trudged back toward the cabin, snow crunching under his boots, wind howling like distant artillery fire. When he finally pushed through the door, warmth hit him like a blessing. He laid the mother dog by the fire, unwrapped the trembling puppies, and whispered, "You're safe now." He didn't know it yet, but saving them that night would change everything. Steam rose from the metal pot as Jack poured warm water into a bowl beside the fire. The mother German shepherd lay on a thick blanket, her breathing shallow but steady. The puppies, now wrapped in an old army jacket, whimpered softly in their sleep. Jack's cabin, once silent and empty, now echoed with fragile signs of life. He knelt beside the shepherd, his fingers brushing gently through her fur. Beneath the grime and frost, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten, a deep healed scar running along her neck. It wasn't from an accident. It looked deliberate, surgical. He leaned closer, his old instincts flickering awake like a switch he thought had long been broken. Years of military service had trained him to read every mark, every sign of conflict. This dog hadn't just survived the wild, she'd been through combat. Jack's heart pounded as he ran his hand along her collar, feeling the faint engraving of a metal tag frozen in ice. He chipped at it carefully until the letters came into view. K9 117, Valor Unit. For a moment, he just stared at it. The name struck something buried deep within him. "Valor Unit," he whispered, his breath fogging in the cold air. He'd heard that name before, back when he was stationed overseas. It was the code name for a classified K9 task force that had vanished during a covert mission 5 years ago. No survivors were ever reported. The shepherd stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open. They were intelligent, watchful, and full of something he recognized: pain. She tried to lift her head, but Jack gently pressed his hand on her shoulder. "Easy, soldier," he murmured. "You're home now." He sat back, staring at the fire, his mind spinning. How had she survived? And why was she here, alone in the wilderness with 2 newborn puppies? His instincts told him this was no coincidence. Something bigger was unfolding. something that reached far beyond the quiet snow outside his cabin walls. For the first time in years, Jack Mercer felt it again. The call of duty. The flicker of the fire cast long shadows across the cabin walls, painting flashes of orange and gold that danced over the scars on Jack's hands. He leaned back in his old armchair, staring at the German shepherd sleeping near the hearth. Her rhythmic breathing, the soft crackle of flames, the faint whistle of wind outside, and all should have been peaceful, but peace had never come easy to him. As he watched her, memories began to surface, not as gentle recollections, but as sharp, vivid flashes. He was back in the desert again years ago, surrounded by chaos. The sun was brutal, the air thick with dust and gunfire. Jack crouched beside his own canine partner, Ranger, a loyal German shepherd who had saved his life more than once. He could still feel the dog's heartbeat against his arm as explosions thundered nearby. Ranger had been more than a dog. He was a soldier, a brother, a piece of Jack's soul that never made it home. Jack blinked hard, dragging himself back to the present, but the ghosts didn't fade. He saw the same determination in the eyes of this shepherd, the same quiet strength. He whispered softly, "You've seen war too, haven't you?" Her ears twitched faintly as if she understood. He stood and retrieved a small, worn photo from his wallet. It showed him in uniform, kneeling beside Ranger. The edges were frayed, the image faded, but the bond it captured was unbreakable. Jack stared at it for a long time, then looked back at the mother dog and her pups. Maybe this was fate, a second chance to honor what he'd lost. The universe had a strange way of calling soldiers back to battle, even when the war was long over. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls, but inside, something within Jack Mercer had reignited. Not the fire of war, but the spark of purpose. The storm outside grew fiercer, hammering the windows like angry fists. Jack knelt beside the mother German shepherd, her breathing shallow, her body trembling under the blanket. The puppies nestled close to her, but even they seemed to sense that something was terribly wrong. One of them whimpered softly, nudging at her unmoving paw. Jack's pulse quickened. He had seen soldiers die in his arms, but this felt different, helpless, personal. He grabbed his first aid kit, the same one he'd carried through war zones, and pulled out antiseptic, gauze, and a syringe of fluids. His hand shook slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of memory. "Not again," he muttered under his breath. "Not this time." He cleaned her wounds with careful precision, noticing more scars, bullet grazes, burn marks, healed cuts that told stories of missions gone wrong. Whoever she was, she had survived more than any creature should, but survival was slipping away fast. Her breathing faltered, eyes glazing. Jack's heart pounded. He tore through his medical supplies, whispering, "Come on, girl. Stay with me." He found an old emergency phone, static crackling as he dialed. "Doc Harper," he said when the voice answered. "It's Jack. I need you at the cabin, right now. I've got an injured dog. Bad shape." "Jack, the roads are frozen solid. Then bring your snowmobile," he snapped, desperation breaking through his composure. "She won't make it till morning." Minutes later, the distant roar of an engine pierced the wind. Jack opened the door to see the headlights of a snowmobile cutting through the storm. Dr. Harper, an old friend and retired veterinarian, stumbled in with his gear. "Good God." "Jack," Harper muttered, kneeling by the dog. "What happened to her?" "I don't know," Jack said, voice low. "But she's not just any stray. Look at her scars." The vet's eyes narrowed as he examined the dog, then the puppies. "These markings, they look military." Jack felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The vet began working quickly, administering fluids, checking vitals. Jack sat nearby, hands clenched, watching helplessly. Outside, the storm roared. But inside, 3 fragile lives hung in the balance, and a soldier prayed that, for once, the battle would end in survival. Hours passed before the storm began to ease. The wind outside softened to a mournful whistle, but inside the cabin, tension still lingered thick in the air. The fire burned low, casting a dim orange glow over the worn wooden floor. Dr. Harper sat cross-legged beside the German shepherd, now resting more peacefully. Her breathing had steadied, though she remained weak. The 2 puppies, fed and wrapped in a wool blanket, slept beside her, tiny bodies rising and falling in rhythm. Jack leaned forward, eyes fixed on the metal tag they'd found around her neck. He turned it over carefully, brushing off dried mud and ice. Embedded beneath the engraved code K91 and 17 was something else, a microchip port. "She's chipped," Jack muttered. Harper nodded, pulling a handheld scanner from his bag. The device beeped softly as it read the signal. Then a string of letters and numbers appeared on the screen. Harper's brow furrowed. "What does it say?" Jack asked, his voice low. Harper hesitated. "This isn't a regular registry ID. It's military-grade encryption." He adjusted his glasses and squinted at the code. "Project Valor, the Classified Operations U.S. Defense." Jack froze. The name hit him like a bullet. "That's impossible," he said slowly. "Valor was shut down years ago." "Apparently not," Harper replied grimly. "This dog belonged to someone with clearance." Jack looked at the sleeping shepherd, her fur glinting faintly in the firelight. "She's a survivor," he whispered. "But from what?" Harper shut off the scanner. "Whatever she escaped from, she didn't leave alone. Those puppies, they could be the reason." Jack's jaw tightened. The code, the scars, the military tag, it all pointed to something bigger than chance. He stared into the flames, the crackling echoing like gunfire in his mind. Somewhere out there, someone had lost this dog. Or worse, was looking for her. Morning light crept through the frosted windows, painting the cabin in pale gold. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world blanketed in silence and snow. Inside, the warmth of the fire mingled with the faint sound of tiny whimpers. The puppies were awake now, one black and tan, the other light brown, both weak but fighting to stand on trembling legs. Jack crouched beside them, offering a small bowl of warm milk. They stumbled forward, their little noses twitching. A faint smile crossed his face. After years of loss, the sound of life felt like redemption. Dr. Harper leaned over the mother dog, checking her vitals again. "She's stabilizing," he said softly. "But these pups, there's something unusual about them." Jack looked up, concern flashing in his eyes. "Unusual how?" Harper carefully lifted one of the puppies into the light. "See this?" he murmured, parting the fur around its shoulder. There, beneath the soft coat, was a faint scar, circular, almost surgical. "That's not from birth," Harper said. "And look at the pattern. It's the same alignment used in embedded tracking protocols. Experimental ones." Jack's face hardened. "You're saying someone operated on them?" "Or engineered them," Harper replied quietly. "Whatever program their mother came from, these pups might have been part of it." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jack glanced at the sleeping shepherd. Her breathing was calm now, but her body bore too many marks of survival, too many secrets carved into her skin. "What kind of people would do that?" he asked, voice heavy with anger. "The same kind who lose control of what they create," Harper said grimly. Jack gently took the puppy in his hands. It looked up at him with innocent, glassy eyes, unaware of the mystery it carried. In that moment, Jack made an unspoken promise to protect them no matter who came looking, because something told him someone would. By late afternoon, the forest had gone unnervingly still. The snow-covered trees stood like statues, their branches heavy with silence. Jack stepped outside the cabin, exhaling a cloud of mist into the cold air. The storm had cleared, but a new tension lingered, one that had nothing to do with weather. His boots crunched through the thin crust of snow as he circled the cabin perimeter, scanning the tree line out of habit. Old instincts died hard. Near the edge of his property, he stopped. Tire tracks, fresh ones. They cut through the snow, winding down the old logging road that hadn't been used in months. He crouched, brushing his gloved fingers over them. The tread pattern was deep, military grade, not something a random hiker would leave behind. His jaw tightened. Someone had been there recently. Jack rose slowly, eyes narrowing toward the dark forest beyond. In the distance, the faint glint of metal caught the light, the edge of a side mirror vanishing behind the trees. A black SUV, no plates visible. It lingered for a few seconds before reversing out of sight, the engine a low growl swallowed by the woods. He stood motionless, every muscle tensed. Whoever they weren't lost tourists. They'd found him, or rather her. Jack returned to the cabin, his pulse thudding in his ears. Inside, the firelight painted calm scenes, the mother shepherd resting, her puppies nestled close. But peace was an illusion now. He walked to the window, peering through a slit in the curtains. Nothing but endless snow, yet his gut screamed otherwise. Dr. Harper noticed his expression. "You see something?" Jack nodded slowly. Tracks SUV, someone's been watching. Harper frowned. Out here? In this weather? Jack's gaze lingered on the distant tree line. They weren't here by accident. They knew exactly where to look. He moved toward his old army duffel in the corner, unzipping it to reveal a sidearm, a flashlight, and a worn pair of binoculars. If they come back, he muttered, loading the gun, they'll find out this cabin isn't easy to break into. Outside, the wind whispered faintly through the pines. But somewhere beyond that sound, another presence lingered, patient and watching. Night fell like a shroud over the mountains. The once calm forest now breathed with eerie stillness, every rustle magnified by the silence. Jack sat by the window, his rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the frosted glass. The fire had burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the cabin walls. Inside, the mother shepherd stirred restlessly beside her pups, letting out a low, uneasy growl. Jack's instincts prickled. The kind of tension he'd felt before ambushes overseas, that quiet before chaos. He turned off the lamp, plunging the room into dim firelight. The air felt heavy, too still. Then, without warning, the generator outside coughed once, then died. The cabin sank into silence. Jack stood immediately, moving with the precision of a soldier who'd survived too many nights like this. Stay quiet, he whispered to Harper. He grabbed his flashlight, but before turning it on, he listened and really listened. The sound came then, faint crunches in the snow, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Rex, that was what Jack had started calling the shepherd, rose weakly, her fur bristling. She moved in front of the puppies, ears pinned, eyes locked on the door. A deep growl vibrated from her chest, low and warning. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Whoever was out there wasn't wandering. They were closing in. He slipped toward the window and peered out. Nothing. Just the pale glow of moonlight reflecting off snowdrifts. Then a shadow moved, quick, human. Another followed. 2, maybe 3 figures dressed in dark gear, circling the cabin. Harper, Jack murmured, barely audible. Get to the back room. Lock the door. The vet obeyed, scooping up the puppies as Rex pressed closer to Jack's leg, teeth bared, growl deepening. Outside, the sound of boots stopped. Then came a soft metallic click, the unmistakable sound of a weapon being chambered. Jack's breath stilled. He raised his rifle and whispered to the dog, Easy, girl. Looks like our quiet life just ended. The silence shattered with the sound of breaking glass. A flashbang rolled across the wooden floor, erupting in a blinding flash and thunderous crack. Jack's training kicked in instantly. He dropped to the ground, covering his eyes as Rex barked ferociously, leaping in front of him. The puppies wailed from the back room. Through the haze, dark figures burst through the door, their movements swift and tactical. 3 of them, armed, faces masked, voices low but commanding. Secure the target. One barked. Jack fired a warning shot into the ceiling. You picked the wrong cabin. He roared, the sound echoing through the walls. The intruders ducked behind furniture, returning fire with controlled bursts that shattered glass and splintered wood. The cabin filled with gunpowder smoke and the acrid scent of burning fabric. Rex lunged at the nearest attacker, her body a blur of fury. She hit him square in the chest, knocking him off balance. The man yelled, trying to fend her off, but she bit deep into his arm, refusing to let go. Another intruder raised his weapon toward her, but Jack's shot came first. The man's gun flew from his grip as he stumbled backward. Dr. Harper, crouched in the back room, held the puppies close, his voice trembling into the radio. We need help. Officer under attack. Coordinates. Static drowned the rest. Jack crawled behind the overturned table, sweat and adrenaline surging through him. He fired again, aiming low, forcing the attackers back toward the doorway. One retreated, shouting into a comms device, Abort extraction, repeat abort. They're armed. Rex released her grip, panting, blood streaking her fur. Jack reached out, pulling her behind cover. Good girl, he breathed, his voice shaking. You're not done yet. Outside, the headlights of the black SUV flickered to life. The remaining intruders scrambled out, retreating into the stormy night. Jack followed them to the doorway, rifle raised, but they were already gone, swallowed by the forest's dark silence. He lowered his weapon, the cold air biting at his skin. Behind him, Rex limped but stood tall, eyes still fixed on the door. The puppies whimpered softly, unaware of the danger that had nearly taken everything. Jack exhaled, chest heaving. They weren't thieves, he muttered. They came for her, and deep down he knew they'd be back. The night dragged into uneasy silence, broken only by the crackle of dying embers and Rex's labored breathing. Jack sat at the table, his rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the shattered door. Dr. Harper patched a cut on his arm with trembling hands, the adrenaline still running high. The puppies slept, curled against their mother, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. Jack's mind raced. The precision of the intruders, their military movements, it wasn't random. They weren't thieves or poachers. They were trained. They called her a target, he murmured, rubbing a hand over his face. Not a dog. Harper looked up sharply. A target? You're saying they came for her specifically? Jack nodded grimly. And they knew exactly where to find us. Harper hesitated, then reached into his medical bag. There's something I didn't tell you, he said quietly, pulling out a folded document. After I scanned her chip, I made a call to an old contact at the Defense Biotech Division. Jack's brow furrowed. And, Harper placed the paper on the table, Project Valor wasn't just a K-9 training unit. It was a biogenic enhancement program. They were experimenting on military dogs, boosting intelligence, sensory range, even regenerative abilities. Classified work. Most of it shut down after ethical violations. Jack's chest tightened. So you're telling me she's one of them? Not just her, Harper said grimly, nodding toward the sleeping puppies. Those pups were bred as second-generation prototypes. The next phase. But someone wanted them erased. Jack's eyes darkened. And when she escaped, they sent a retrieval team. Harper nodded slowly. A private contractor, most likely. Not official military, someone cleaning up loose ends. Jack leaned back, the weight of it all pressing down. The memories of war, the loyalty of the dogs he'd served with, all of it came flooding back. They used her, then tried to destroy her, he muttered. And now they'll do the same to her pups. Rex stirred at the sound of his voice. Her eyes flicking open, wary, intelligent, and far too human. Jack met her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They started this, he said quietly. But we're going to finish it. Dawn crept over the horizon, staining the snow in hues of pale gold and blue. Smoke drifted lazily from the cabin's chimney, a fragile sign of life in the wilderness. Inside, Jack sat at the table surrounded by the remnants of chaos. Bullet holes in the walls, shattered glass, and blood-stained bandages. Rex lay near the fire, her pups nestled safely against her, the flickering light casting a halo around them. Jack's mind was a storm. Every instinct screamed at him that this wasn't over. Whoever wanted those dogs wouldn't give up. He reached for the old satellite phone, a relic from his service days, dusty but reliable. His fingers hesitated before dialing a number burned into memory. The line clicked. A familiar voice answered, low and wary. Mercer? You're supposed to be retired, Jack exhaled. Yeah, well, retirement's overrated. I need intel, Colonel, now. There was a long pause. You've got 30 seconds. What's this about? Jack explained everything. The shepherd, the microchip, the attack. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then the colonel spoke again, his tone sharp. Listen carefully. You're sitting on evidence of something we were ordered to erase. Project Valor didn't end and it went underground. You need to disappear. Disappear? Jack frowned. I'm not running. This isn't a request, Mercer. Those dogs are classified assets. If they find you, they'll erase everything, including you. Jack's jaw clenched. So that's it? Pretend it never happened? Let them clean up their mess? Sometimes that's the only way men like us stay alive, the colonel replied quietly. Then the line went dead. Jack lowered the phone slowly, his reflection flickering in the dark window. Outside, the forest looked calm, deceptively calm. He turned toward Rex, who lifted her head, her eyes locked on him. He sighed. Looks like they want us gone, girl. Rex's ears twitched as if she understood. Jack's gaze hardened. But we're not running. By the time the sun dipped behind the mountain ridge, the decision had been made. Jack moved through the cabin with silent precision, packing supplies. Ammo, food, blankets, and whatever medical gear Dr. Harper could spare. Every sound felt amplified, every movement deliberate. The puppies whimpered softly as Rex stood protectively near them, her eyes alert. They'll track us by nightfall, Harper warned, securing the last of the medical kits. You can't fight an army out here. Jack zipped his duffel and slung it over his shoulder. "I don't plan to fight," he said quietly. "I plan to disappear." He knelt beside Rex, running a gloved hand over her fur. The dog pressed her head against his palm, her gaze steady, trusting. "We move fast, stay quiet," he whispered. No turning back. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they stepped out into the fading twilight. The forest loomed vast and silent, its icy branches glowing faintly under the silver moonlight. Jack led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through mist as the group moved deeper into the trees. Behind them, the cabin stood like a ghost, its light fading into the storm's growing breath. Hours passed in tense silence. The forest seemed endless, an expanse of white shadows and echoing wind. Then in the distance, a low hum began to rise. Jack froze. The sound was mechanical, steady, pulsing. He looked up. Through the canopy, faint red lights flickered across the sky. Drones. "They found us," Harper whispered. Jack grabbed his rifle and motioned for cover. "Get down, now!" The drones swept over the treetops, their beams slicing through the dark. Jack's heart pounded as one light passed dangerously close to their hiding spot. He held his breath, every muscle rigid. Rex crouched beside him, silent, her ears twitching to every sound. Then chaos. A spotlight hit the snow 20 feet away. A voice over a loudspeaker crackled. "Visual acquired. Move in." Jack's pulse surged. "Go!" he shouted. They ran. Branches whipped past, snow exploding beneath their feet. The puppies cried softly as Harper shielded them under his coat. Bullets tore through the trees. Jack fired back once, forcing the soldiers to scatter. They vanished into the wilderness, swallowed by darkness and falling snow. For now, they had survived. The wind screamed through the forest as dawn broke, gray light spilling across the frozen landscape. Jack's breath came in harsh bursts, each exhale forming clouds in the frigid air. His boots sank into deep snow as he and Harper pushed forward, their bodies aching from exhaustion. Behind them, Rex limped but kept moving, her pups cradled carefully in Harper's pack. The distant hum of engines echoed through the trees. They were closing in. Jack glanced back. Dark figures moved between the pines, methodical and fast. "They're flanking us," he muttered. "We can't outrun them," Harper gasped. Not with the dogs. Jack scanned the horizon. Ahead, the forest opened into a wide expanse, a frozen lake stretching beneath the rising sun. It wasn't safety, but it was space, a place to make a stand. "We hold here," he said firmly. Harper hesitated. "Jack, go, take the pups and move to cover. She and I will buy you time." The vet saw the look in his eyes, steady, unshakable, and nodded. Harper ran toward the boulders by the lake's edge, clutching the bag tight. Jack took position behind a fallen log, rifle ready. Rex stood beside him, battered but defiant, her growl low and constant. The first soldier broke from the tree line, gun raised. Jack fired one precise shot. The man dropped. More followed, spreading out. Bullets tore through snow and bark, sending splinters flying. Jack returned fire, his hands steady despite the chaos. A round struck the ground inches from Rex. She lunged forward with a roar, slamming into an attacker who'd crept too close. The man fell back screaming as she bit down, refusing to yield even as a second soldier aimed his rifle. "Rex!" Jack shouted, firing before the soldier could pull the trigger. The man crumpled. Rex staggered back, blood staining her fur, but her eyes blazed with unbroken resolve. When the last echo of gunfire faded, the forest fell eerily still. The surviving mercenaries retreated into the trees, their radios crackling orders to abort. Jack dropped to his knees beside Rex, cradling her head gently. "You did it, girl," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You saved them." The sun rose fully then, gold light spilling over the lake, illuminating the quiet aftermath of a battle no one would ever know had been fought. The sun hung low over the ridge, turning the snow into a field of gold. Smoke curled faintly from the spent gun barrels, and the frozen air carried only the sound of distant crows. Jack knelt beside Rex, his gloves soaked with her blood. Her breathing was shallow, every inhale a fragile whisper. The puppies whimpered softly from Harper's coat, their tiny bodies pressed close for warmth. "Stay with me, girl," Jack murmured, pressing a trembling hand against her neck. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a depth of understanding that cut straight through him. No words, just a silent exchange between two soldiers who had fought their final war together. Dr. Harper moved carefully toward them. "We need to get her to the truck," he said gently. She's fading, Jack. Jack shook his head slowly. She's tired. She's done her duty. Rex gave a faint whine, pressing her nose weakly against his hand, her tail moving once in a slow, grateful sweep. The fire in her eyes dimmed, but there was peace in her gaze, no fear, no pain. Just trust. Jack bowed his head, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. You saved them, he whispered. You saved all of us. The wind swept softly across the lake, lifting a swirl of snow that shimmered in the sunlight like dust from heaven. Rex's breathing slowed, then stopped. Jack's heart seemed to break with the silence that followed. Hours later, they buried her beneath a tall pine overlooking the frozen water. Jack carved her name into a smooth stone and placed it at the head of the mound. Rex, soldier, guardian, friend. Weeks passed. News broke of a military whistleblower exposing the truth behind Project Valor. The story spread like wildfire: illegal testing, enhanced K9s, and the operation's brutal cover-up. The world was outraged, but justice at last had begun. Jack stood on the ridge with Harper as the two puppies played in the snow below. The sun glinted off their fur, alive and free. Harper smiled faintly. She'd be proud, you know. Jack watched the horizon, his voice quiet but sure. She already knows. A month later, the mountains were calm again. Spring sunlight filtered through the pines, melting away the last traces of snow. Jack's cabin had been rebuilt. New glass, repaired walls, but the spirit of the place had changed. The fire crackled warmly, and beside it lay the two growing German Shepherd puppies, chasing each other clumsily across the wooden floor. Their energy filled the once silent home with life again. Jack sat at his desk, an envelope before him. Inside was a letter from the Department of Defense, an official acknowledgement of Project Valor's exposure and termination. No charges, no arrests, just words on paper. He read the last line aloud, voice thick with irony. Your cooperation is appreciated. Then he folded it and tossed it into the fire. Some things didn't need closure, only peace. On the mantel, a framed photo rested beside Rex's military tag. Jack had cleaned it until it gleamed in the firelight. Below it, carved into a small wooden plaque, were the words, "She didn't need saving. She saved me." When the story reached the public, it spread faster than any headline. People around the world shared her tale. The soldier who rescued a dying dog only to discover she was the true hero. Donations poured in for K9 shelters and veteran programs. Artists painted murals, children wrote letters, and soldiers saluted her name. The internet called her the dog who fought twice, once for country, once for family. Jack rarely spoke to the press, but one evening, standing on his porch with the sunset painting the valley in gold, he recorded a short message. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the weight of truth. Heroes aren't made in wars. They're made in moments, when someone chooses compassion over fear. Rex reminded me of that. The video went viral. Millions watched, cried, shared, and remembered. And as the camera faded on Jack and the two playful pups behind him, the world was reminded of one timeless truth. Sometimes the greatest warriors walk on four legs.